Good morning. We are in Genesis 41. Genesis 41. We're in Genesis 41, y'all. Let's kick it off. All right, and it came to pass that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord. Hold on. That's 40. 41. And it came to pass, they both start off the same. All right. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by a river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored, kine, and fat-fleshed. Those are cattle. And they fed in a meadow. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the dream about the famine, okay, that Joseph interprets. And they fed in a meadow. Verse 3, 41. Genesis 41, verse 3. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. Verse 4, and the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine, so Pharaoh awoke. Verse 5, and he slept and dreamed the second time, and behold, the 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. Okay, so it's basically, first you had fat kernels, and then you had real thin ones that had barely nothing on them. Okay. I'll read that again, verse 6. And behold, 7 thin ears and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them, and the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake, verse 9, then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do not remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. Both me? That's kind of odd. Both me. It's almost like it's coming from the standpoint of the butler. Let's look into this. Before we go any further, let me check over here. Verse 41. It says, I got 3 different Bibles right here, y'all. Okay, so this situation, we're going to read on for a second, but this is basically what brings up Joseph, because the chief butler remembers Joseph. at this time. And it took 2 years, it says. And Joseph is now 30 years old. He's been in Egypt for about 12 years, it says. I don't, like I said, I don't trust all this stuff that they're saying about these footnotes. But I'm just telling you what it says. Okay. So, yeah. Well, I was just trying to figure out whose standpoint that was coming from, because it says me. Let's see. We'll keep reading. And by the way, y'all, I've undertaken to go to study more about Christianity and debating and the Messiah and all of that stuff. I've undertaken because one of my nemesis, biblical scholar, that's his screen name. We were chatting back and forth, you know. Make a long story short, I'm like, hey man, just give me your best guns, man. What do you, because he says, you know, the Bible isn't true, it can't be trusted, Christ isn't the Messiah, stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, give me your best guns first, man. I'll read any book you want me to read, stuff like that. He's like, okay, blah, blah, blah. He sends me this name. He said, oh, go read this dude. I'm not going to say no name what the dude was, because kind of, if your faith isn't strong, that kind of stuff will pull you away fast. So he sent me this dude. I went and checked it out. You know, this dude is a published guy, a Jewish guy, basically saying that Christ isn't the Messiah and a lot of other stuff to it. He's respectful, you know. So I started a long video. He wrote 2 books called, well, I ain't gonna say no names, like I said, but yeah. So I'm going down this alley, and the video is just all about him. And as he's talking, you can tell he's just leading up. He's saying a lot of stuff, but he really ain't saying nothing. He really just trying to brainwash you up, trying to get you warmed up for whatever kind of BS he's gonna lay out there. Now, he may believe what he's saying. I don't know. But, so I said, hold on, this is just too much. He's getting too much momentum right here with his whole solo speech that he making. Like, just say what you got to say and get out the way. Don't try to butter me up and all this, what you saying. Okay? So I said, hold up, man. It was like a 2-hour long video. I watched it for about 20 minutes. I said, dude, this dude trying to gain too much momentum before he say what he's saying. So I said, let me back up, and I backed up, and I found a debate between him and another Christian scholar. Needless to say, he got whooped in the debate by the Christian dude. So I felt good about that, but I'm undertaking, just so you all know, at Preach Fact, I'm also a student myself of deeper meanings and deeper, and I'm educating myself about the different layers of attacks that can go against the Christ and everything. And from what I've seen so far, it's looking really good. I was first skeptical. I said, hold on. Because, you know, I have a live show too sometimes where we do debates, and I want to make sure that I have my knife sharpened and stuff like that, and my barrel loaded. Okay? So I'm watching the video, and dude gets beat down pretty bad. I mean, the other dude, the Christian dude, won to me. And some of the main point, it's just a really, and at first I was skeptical. I said, you know what, this is gonna be bad for us, man, for the Christ position, because I feel like they have overwhelming evidence, but they don't. From what I've seen, they don't have overwhelming evidence. So it's a win for Christ, okay? It's a win for Christ. Me being I'm not very skilled in that area, knowing about all the Jewish opposition and different stances that they can take on that. But I'm learning. I've undertaken. This is not just something I'm doing. This is like my life's work, learning about the Christ and learning about all of the opposition's positions. Learning about all of their positions they take. So, I'm not saying that the Jews are opposition. I'm saying that anything anti-Christ or lack of information is an opposition, or atheist. They're not really opposition. They really just harvest. We're trying to get them where they need to be. But at the same time, so my faith is going up, y'all. Okay, so I just want to share that with y'all, that on my free time I'm studying deeper levels of understanding the scriptures, the Talmud, the Tanakh, and stuff like that they're talking about, while at the same time staying grounded. And I gotta tell y'all, it's looking really good for the Christ, because it's not just oh, Christ said he raised from the dead. No, there's actual solid evidence out there, and scholarly people that have made the same. It's overwhelming evidence in support of the Christ. And now, without getting into details, I'll write a paper later or something like that. I'll write a paper later about this with details. All right, but this is big, man. This is big, and I'm ready to go worldwide with this, because dude was really embarrassed, man. One of the things he said, and I don't want to get too far off track. We're not off track. One of the things he said, well, the New Testament writers wrote the Bible, book of Matthew, like 80 years, like between 50 and 80 years after the death of Christ. And he said that was a good point to discredit what they were saying. Well, the Christian dude said, well, hey, how many years after the flood was the flood written about? He said about 2,800 years, something like that. The Jewish dude. So he said, so how are you going to discredit my line when you worship yours? The flood count, the account of the flood, you validate that, but it was written 2,800 years after the flood. But mine was written 60 after Christ, but you're using that timeline to discredit, as an attempt or a line of reasoning to discredit mine. But yours is 2,800 years after the flood, and you're not discrediting that. And dude was just like, so it was a real knockout, man. He really couldn't say anything. And a lot of these people, you had to bear with them, guys. But no, don't get me wrong. I'm willing to hear the case. Let me hear the case. Let me hear your science. Let me hear your stuff that says the Christ isn't who he says he is. And all they're doing is just saying stuff. It's not really saying anything. But this is not just your standard church, y'all, where we just read Bibles. No, we want to get the meat on the bone from every angle. Every intellectual angle they have, every theological angle they have, every interpretation angle they have, we want to know. This is not your regular church. We don't just read and say, hey, believe. That's not how that works. We believe because it's true, and we want the facts, and we want the case. And the overwhelming evidence. Even the Jews back in the day, pre-Christian times, and post-Christian writers that were Jews and stuff like that had a lot to say about the Christ that was pro-Christ. Okay? And a lot of the stuff the guy wasn't, one of the main points that my dude was mentioning, the Christian dude, this is like a PhD, of theology. One of the main points that he was mentioning was that the opposition, the Jewish dude who says that Christ is the Messiah, he wasn't acknowledging a lot of the Christ-like ideologies, because there were different types of Jews pre-Christian. The Jewish ideology has been evolving, in a lot of ways. Not always, but in a lot of ways. There's different sects. There's different types of Jews, different ideologies, how it has evolved, and stuff like that. So what he was trying to say was that there's different type of ideologies. A lot of them was expecting a Christ with their interpretation of the scriptures, expecting a Christ like the Jesus. But he was pointing out that the Jewish dude had taken a stance that was more narrow-minded as far as what all the ideologies were back then. But the Christian dude pointed out that no, that wasn't all the way that you're describing this interpretation is not the full scope of the interpretation in that time. You've taken a narrow scope of this interpretation and you're laying it out there like it's law, like that's the only one. No, there was a wide range of scopes of interpretations in the Jewish culture back then. So it wasn't just like that anti-Messiah or anti-Christ. It wasn't like that thing that he's saying was all there was. No, there was a lot of people. There was a lot of Jews that went with Jesus. I think he said over like 10,000 or something like that went with Jesus at that time. So most of the Christian, don't quote me on this, but most of the early Christians were Jews. So that whole ideology that they like to say, they don't like to mention that. Okay, so I'm not saying they. There's no they. I mean, this is not, I don't have nothing against Jews. Jesus was a Jew, So I say all that to say, guys, here at this channel, I'm studying. I'm not just a guy reading a Bible. I'm looking at debates, and I'm trying to sharpen up my knives as a debater, because I plan on being a real beast in that field at some point. And if just knowing scriptures, knowing interpretations, comparing stuff, that kind of thing, I'm gonna get there, and I'm doing the work for this work is in defense of the Lord. And I hate to tell you, but that's the winning side. Christ is the winning side so far. But I'm willing to hear everything. I'm willing to hear everything about opposing ideologies. Let's hear it. Let's see it. Let's look it up. Show me your stuff. One of the main points of the Christian dude was that there's an empty tomb and all that. He said the resurrection is key. That's the main point. The other guy didn't really have a case at all about the resurrection. He didn't really say anything about the resurrection. So the main point that I'm noticing from this stuff is that it's overwhelming evidence, scholarly over the ages, since the Christ and pre-Christ. The scholarly stuff that has been written about beliefs about the Christ and everything has been overwhelming evidence supporting. For one, it's absolutely crazy to say he wasn't there. It didn't happen. That's just crazy. That's just not the case. Period. Okay. Man, I'm getting tore up, man. So let me pull upstairs because these mosquitoes are tearing me slap up. So yeah, guys, that's a big point to make, man. That we're in Genesis 41, but it was like a 2-hour-long video. So first of all, it was a guy who says that Jesus isn't the Messiah, but he recognized he stands behind God. You know, he says God is God, the God of Abraham, the God of the Old Testament, but it's not Jesus the Messiah. So it's important to know these different ideologies. Okay, you got your atheists, you got they don't believe in God at all. Then you got the devout Jews like him who say Jesus was the Messiah. So I say all that so that we know the arrows that are formed against us. You know, we know who our enemy is spiritually. We know the different stances they can take, and that way I'm more well informed as a spiritual soldier, I guess you could say, to know who my enemy is and know the different stances. Okay, so and I feel like it's my duty to do that. Not only for y'all, but for me to inform y'all of the different ideologies that are out there. Because, you know, God, the proof is out there that Christ was risen. It's not just a book where you just have to have faith. No, there's proof out there. So that's my point. That you'd be kind of crazy not to look. Not you, but me. I know me. I can't just not look because that's not the case. Christ is really real. It's really out there. It's not just a book that you have to believe on. And I'm not getting too deep into that. I'm just saying. So if you want up-to-date stuff, modern day, about positions that are being taken, this is the place to get it right here, because I'm going to give it to you. I'm studying about debates. You know, I'm diving in hard about this thing. So yeah, we're doing our study, but guess what? I'm also learning deeply about God and the Christ and different ideologies, because it's not just a historical book. God is a physical God and spiritual that's in our physical world today, moving around. It's not just some story. He's really moving around today and moving. He's not just something that, you know, is on the sideline. God is actually moving around, and you know the enemy is too, I think, through spiritual warfare. So I need to arm myself and educate myself and build my faith up, which I know it has been. And I'm sure that God is leading me by the hand to show me all this stuff. Cautiously, because you got to be careful, man. If you don't have strong faith, a lot of this stuff is going to tear you up. So we're in Genesis 41 still. I just wanted to brief you on that. I'm not going to say no names about the guy that they were studying, because alright, so Genesis 41 says, all the wise men, there, verse 8, and Pharaoh told them his dream. But there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do not remember my faults this day. I'm going to go to verse 9 over here, because 41 verse 9, that sounds a little obscure. We get the full meaning here if we can. We want to get everything. And guys, if you have any other meanings that I'm missing, or if I'm missing something, please reach out and tell me, so that I don't hide the knowledge. I want to hear all sides of this. Even if it's wrong, I want to hear it. Or even if it's your own private interpretation, I want to hear it about what's going on. That's not what we do here. That's not what we do here. We want the full compass of perspective, okay? We want to hear the bad stuff, the wrong stuff, the attacks, the slander. We want to hear it all because Christ stands firm. Period. End of story. Christ stands firm. You can ask the scholars over the centuries. You can ask anybody that has any sense. Christ stands firm. Intellectually, physically, historically, spiritually, eternally. God stands firm with the Christ. Period. End of story. Have a nice day. Verse 9. 41 verse 9 says, Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. So the cupbearer is saying, hey, I remember I was supposed to tell you about Joseph, but I didn't. That's what's going on right here, according to the footnotes, and it makes sense. Okay, so now that we got that looked at, so we got everything covered on that. We know what that means. Okay, because it's kind of, you wouldn't really know that or be for sure unless you really looked. It says right here in verse 9, it says, Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker, and we dreamed a dream in one night. Verse 11. And I and he, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dream he did interpret. Verse 13, 41:13, Genesis 41. And it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. Ha! Sheesh. ATW, pack and roll. Then he sent, verse 14 again, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and then brought him hastily. I love it. Get him out of there. Hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee, that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And that's basically a lot. I can relate to that because this channel is not me. It's not me. I've been telling my roommate since day one, hey, my cellmate, I said, hey man, this stuff isn't me, bro. I'm just here. All this stuff is happening. You're giving me a tablet. I'm not writing in the tablet, then I pick it up. You know, it's just been multiple signs. I'm telling my mom over the phone about a scripture, and he's reading that scripture at the same time. It's just multiple signs coming in that I know God is real. Okay, now that was a bit off topic, but for the record, I want everybody to know that my study is an unbiased study. You know, of course, I don't want to be wrong, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You know, if I find something that defeats the Christ, I'll hear it. If it's there, I'll see it. You know, I'm not forcing the Christ. He forced himself. It's there, okay? But I'm unbiased in my research. I want y'all to know this is an intellectual channel. We're actually trying to look at all the evidence and make our best and be informed fully. Okay, so there's spiritual warfare going on, guys. There's stuff going on where they don't want you to know the truth. I say they, the powers that be. So guys, I just want you to know that my research is unbiased. It's not like if I see something that's against the Christ, I'm not just going to say discredit it. No, I want to hear what you have to say, you know, to a certain extent. But I want y'all to know I'm unbiased. And that's important that we're unbiased. God is not a God that won't allow. God is not, that's not how that works. There's really proof out there so far. So I'm willing to hear the stuff. It's looking good. Everything's looking good. We're all in the clear. We are in the clear. It's a win for Christ. Period. It is a win for Christ. Okay? That's not how God works. God is a winner. God is a winner. Okay? That's how that works. Alright, so and guys, it's important to know that because, you know, in a court of law, even a guilty guy can have a case that sounds absolutely true. You know, and people get off all the time that are guilty. So if you give somebody that's not telling the truth, who has convinced themselves, or whatever the case may be, that's why they have jurors. Even somebody that's lying or trying to hide something, if given enough time and given enough examples, they can convince somebody that they're innocent. Even themselves. People do it all the time. They believe their own lies, stuff like that. So you have to be careful what you listen to and realize if there's any grounds to it, or are they just trying to butter you up, or are they just putting a lot of emphasis on nothing that's there. What we're doing here is we're defending that the Christ is the Son of God, and he is. We're not worried about all the titles about the Messiah and all that. We're worried about the validity of what Paul is saying in his theology, and Peter, and all that. That's what we're doing here. That's what we're standing behind. So when you come with your cases, or they come with their cases, it needs to be against that. And what are you saying against that? Because that's what we believe. Okay, that's what. So you have to be careful about long-winded stuff with offshoots of examples that really don't have nothing to do with what we're saying. We're defending the Christ, the risen Messiah who performed miracles. And Paul's theology is dead on, and the Gospels are true, and everything else in the Bible. So we got multiple enemies here. We got the atheists, we got the anti-Messiah, they got the Jews who say that the Messiah isn't real, and I got nothing against the Jews. Without, they're everything. They're the foundation. So we got multiple enemies. But you have to be careful what you're listening to about long-winded stuff that's going to draw you away in other areas, trying to undermine the main point. But at the end of the day, I have to ask myself, okay, what are they saying to disprove that Christ was risen? I've heard a lot of different things. I've heard stuff saying that, it was all made up. That's not adding up. Some Roman dude in Fluvian times or something made it up. That's not adding up. A lot of stuff. You got to make sure that long-winded stuff and a lot of emphasis on stuff, especially if they're by themselves on the video, you need to make sure that they, what we're seeing is like the one I watched last night. They're in a room full of other people. It's like a conference, and they're having a debate. Anybody can get behind a camera and say something. You got to use your sense when you're watching stuff, because if anybody just by themselves, they're saying stuff, could be saying anything. Could be Satan himself saying that stuff. So I'm trying to be cautious of what I watch and make sure there's other people around that we're gonna call them on their BS. The stuff that they're saying in the debate with a conference type environment is going to be more recognized stuff that they're saying. It's not just their own personal opinion. So I'm going to be more cautious about what I watch to study that is more like a conference type setting, because some of this stuff can get really wild on this solo. I can imagine this God guiding me in the right direction. The stuff they're mentioning is going to be published stuff. It's going to be regular stuff, and just because stuff is published doesn't mean it's good either. Anybody can publish anything. I mean, they published a book on how to make meth, something cookbook or something. You can publish a book about anything, making bombs, so the point is, guys, that we're on our way to a healthy study. And there's a lot to learn. Scriptures, Isaiah, most of the foundation of is Isaiah and stuff like that. Most of the foundation is through Isaiah. Zachary, Zephaniah, all that stuff. Deuteronomy, all that stuff is a lot of study to go on there. So, and there's different holy books and stuff like that. But we're good, man. I just wanted to share that we're not just having a wild study about God. No, we're having a guided study with guidelines, and we're taking precautions as far as what, like the dude, when I watched his video, his solo video, he was literally just warming up, and he ended up telling a parable about a flea circus. He said if some guy comes in and says, hey, I got a trick, a flea that does a trick. Here, I'll show you. And the flea does the trick, jumps off his hand, goes onto his head. I was like, hold on now. The dude is going way out of hand to try to butter up to what he's saying. Like, you've had the video, you've had the floor for like 30 minutes, and you haven't said one word about the Christ and where your stance is. So basically that tells me that you need a lot of momentum to say what you need to say. Why do you have to gain so much momentum? Because it's not working for me. And you have to have a sense of that. What are they saying? Why do you need so much momentum and so much buttering up to lay out your case? That's not a good sign for me. That's not a good sign. I understand you have an introduction and all that, but no, it doesn't take all that. It doesn't take all that. So when you're doing all that, that says to me that what you're about to say really doesn't is a lot of what you're saying is basically just like a hunch. That's kind of like what you're telling me on that. So there's different types. I'm learning about oratories and debates and tactics on a debate. I'm learning about stuff like that because that's what we're up against. At the end of the day, the enemy is going to beat you with words. It happened in the Garden of Eden. He was smarter than them. He tricked them. He suggested things. And that's what we're up against in today's world. So I'm not out of line by learning my line of what I'm trying to learn right now. As far as different type of theologies and ideologies based on Old Testament stuff and other holy books. And then you have the atheists and their debating tactics and their stances and their logical stuff. So I got my plate full as far as stuff to learn, y'all. And I'm going to keep you posted throughout the process. But I got to tell you, it's looking really good. It's looking really good. But I'm unbiased. I'm unbiased. And that's a good point to be. That's a good point to be. If there's a case out there, let's hear it. Let's hear what you got to say. I'm confident that God is going to stand firm. And I don't want to speak too much on that because that's just a healthy place to be from a realistic standpoint. That I want my faith to grow even more to the point where it's, even till it's unshakable. So that when I hear everything, I can say, wow, okay, now my faith is real for sure. Real for sure, because now I've heard everything and it's still there. I've heard everything you can say about God, and guess what? God still stands firm. So that's where I want to get to, cautiously. So that I can preach the word with confidence more. I mean, as much I want to preach the word with as much surety as I can. That's the goal. So yeah, I think it's important, and many may not agree. That's just the nature of the world. But I want to know everything I can know because it's got to be solid. You can't really say nothing. It's got to be solid. It's got to be solid because my faith is solid. It's got to be solid because I know who to reference. I know who to study. It's got to be solid against Christ, because the Christ, I hate to tell y'all this, it's not just a dude in a book and a story and us going to church. No, it's way more solid than people think it is, and that's what I'm telling you now. The Christ is way more solid than people know. Yeah, that's the point. And I've been saying it since day one. The message isn't really out there about how real the Christ is. Yeah, most people don't even think God exists, let alone the Christ. Let alone the Christ. They don't know. Oh, he's real, he's not, da 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 da. However that works, I'm here to deliver the message. That's what we're doing here. About the realness of the Christ and all of the attacks on different sides. Now, we're not going to finish Genesis 41 today, obviously. But I got to keep y'all informed about what's going on. This is a spiritual war we're fighting here. Okay? So, most of my stuff I'm going to be researching is going to be on Christian people going against God debates, atheist God debates, and anti-Messiah stuff, and I want to see all the stuff that's out there. There's a lot of stuff out there. Islam debates against Christian, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to see stuff. And you know, you got to make sure that we're not just saying we won and we didn't win. We won. So that's what I'm looking into. But we're good. And if I'm wrong, I'll take my hat off and I'll shut down the channel, and that's what will happen. But guess what? It's not happening yet. So we'll see what happens on that. I'm confident that the Lord is going to pull through. He already has pulled through. I just want to make sure that I get all. I want to see everything that they have, so that my faith can be at its peak. I want to be at the peak of my performance on my faith. Which is why I've laid out guidelines that you can't just give the enemy. You can't just try to take on the enemy by himself on a video where he's got nobody there to really control him. He's just going to say whatever he can say. He's going to brainwash you. He's going to send you down paths. So that's an important point that I noticed today. I need to look at conference type setting videos, so that they can behave and say stuff that's actually in line with modern day stuff, or recognized stuff. They can't just throw out anything, because if left alone, a guy on a camera will say a lot. I'm proof of that. I'm defending the Christ in the Bible. Okay, this is not just a Bible study. Yes, we do that too, but we're also fighting the battle that needs to be fought so that our faith can be secure. Alright, guys? I hope I'm making sense, man, because, you know, that's where God has me at right now, I believe, to go and look and learn and be a more learned teacher. I can know the scriptures, I can know the interpretations from different types of interpretations. I don't have to just learn one way. I can learn your way. I can learn everybody's way, so that I can better understand the attacks and have the educated backing that I need to have against these. So when they quote scripture against me, I can know what they're saying and say, oh, no, okay, I see what you're saying, but we don't really look at it like that. I need to know their attacks. And a lot of it comes from Isaiah 53:5. I might go back and watch that video, but it's a lot of stuff. Scripture saying that Christ is the Messiah and all that. I'm not buying it. It's weak. You know, and I'm not gonna. I've spoke on details in prior videos about some of the stuff they're saying, but sometimes we got to kill them with kindness. You know, being willing to hear their story, willing to hear what they have to say. So that, and a lot of time it's just the fact that we're so kind to them that they're like, wow, maybe he is right. And it's not my job to win you over, you know, it's to win them over. I got to secure my faith first before I try to convince you. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm not doing it to try to convince them. I'm trying to understand my God to the most maximum potential available, through all of the evidence and historical evidence and different standpoints and attacks, so that I can properly defend myself, knowing all of the attacks that are out there. And instead of just hearing somebody's case against it, I'll have an understanding of where they're coming from and understand their background, not personally, but where their ideologies are coming from, so that I can defend myself spiritually. That's what the goal is. I'm learning about all the stuff so that I can defend myself properly spiritually. through this age of information, all the stuff that's thrown around. And if you're not well versed and you don't know your stuff, they can sound real convincing. Well, I got my guns loaded and my knife sharpened. I'm literally ready to smack something spiritually, and I hope that y'all appreciate that. I'm just saying, guys, I'm doing this for y'all and for me and for the world. I'm doing this for y'all. We're gonna defend ourselves spiritually, and that's what we're doing here. Put on the whole armor of God. That's what we're doing here. All right, guys. So look, we stopped at we stopped at 16. 41:16, and 41's a long chapter, y'all. But yeah, guys, I just want to give you a briefing of what I'm doing in my time as far as learning about. I just pretty much said everything. I'm not saying no names. We're not trying to make no attacks about the people that I'm studying. It just happened to be right now. My particular study lately has been the Jews that are saying that. I say the Jews. Not the Jews. Certain people have said that Christ isn't the Messiah, and that's been going on forever. That Jesus isn't the Messiah. That's my main study right now, and you got to watch out for that. And there's multiple attacks, multiple facets on that. There's different types of attacks. You got the atheists that's saying there isn't no God, period. Jews, they say that God is real, but Christ isn't any part of that. So guys, we got to be careful. We know everything that's coming at us. And there's a lot. I just mentioned two. You got other religions. I'm not saying they're wrong. All I'm saying is that I got to protect me. So that's what we're doing here, understanding the different attacks that are coming. Actively. So I'm taking on a study, guys, and that's what we're doing here. And I'm proud that we're doing that. That we're taking an active role to know our enemies, even if they don't know they're our enemies. That's not a good word, enemies. That we know the weapons that are formed against us spiritually, just to take away the truth or to undermine it or something like that. We need to know the weapons formed against us. Okay, whether or not they know they're forming a weapon against us. Because that's worse than throwing shooting a bullet through your chest, ruining somebody's faith, or just saying that the Christ isn't real. You might as well just shoot them in the chest, right through the heart. It'd be better off if you did that than if you tore down their faith, or if their faith got tore down through some of this stuff, these doctrines that they're saying. So I'm not wrong for doing all this at the extent and degree and the rate that I'm doing this. Okay? So, anyway, y'all have a good day. We're on YouTube at Preach Facts, and you can reach out at the Gmail at preachfacts7@gmail.com. Alright? Y'all have a good day.